Welcome to the Foundry by Forge College. I'm your head engineer, and today we're rolling out the blueprints and firing up the equipment for a very special explainer. Welcome to the Responsive Design Lab. Today, we're focusing on how to draft absolutely bulletproof layouts for your Solana dApps so they look and function beautifully no matter what kind of device your users happen to be holding. So last time, we mapped out common proxy architectures. We got the backend talking perfectly, right? But here's the million-dollar question. Your proxy architecture is flawless, the data's flowing seamlessly. But what actually happens when a user opens your dApp on a tiny, cracked smartphone screen while bouncing around on the subway? If that mobile interface is just a broken, unreadable mess, all your brilliant backend engineering, it's literally for nothing. They're just going to close the app and walk away. Total disaster. So to prevent that, we need a plan. And here is our experiment protocol for today's explainer. First up, we've got our lab setup. Second, we're mapping out breakpoints and grids. Third, we'll test component adaptation. Fourth, we're tackling touchscreens. And finally, number 5, we'll run through our prototype validation checklist. Let's get right to it. Number 1, setting up the lab. Okay, let's dive into this. Because as any good builder knows, you really can't start knocking down walls or shifting layouts around until you've poured a rock-solid foundation. Before we even think about shrinking windows or writing media queries, we need our base materials. The absolute most important tool in our lab today is the concept of design tokens. So, what are they? Basically, they're your base spacing units, usually increments of 4 or 8 pixels, and your typographic scales. You want to completely avoid random padding values like, say, 17 pixels here and 23 pixels there. These tokens act as the constant, unchanging variables in our lab. They anchor all of our adaptive changes. If you strictly use multiples of your base tokens, your layout won't have those jarring, unpredictable jumping rhythms when the screen size changes. It just keeps your code maintainable and your design mathematically beautiful. Moving right along to number 2, breakpoints and fluid grids. Now, what's really interesting about this is how we draft our containment fields so our grid doesn't just randomly squish together when it hits specific screen widths. You always want to keep a minimum of 3 predictable tiers. On desktop, which we consider 1280 pixels and up, you've got room to breathe, right? You can run a 3+ column grid, full navigation menus, and massive hero imagery. But when we shrink down to tablet territory, roughly 768 to 1279 pixels, we have to adapt. We drop down to a 2-column grid, or maybe stack our content, and we condense that navigation. Finally, for mobile, which is anything up to 767 pixels, it's extreme survival mode. We're talking a single-column layout, touch-optimized controls, and a heavily simplified navigation menu. Which brings us to number 3, adapting your dApp components. So we've got our grid rules defined. But what actually happens to the buttons and images inside that grid when the viewport drastically shrinks? Well, we have 2 very different approaches: blind scaling versus structural adaptation. Let me use a highly technical analogy for you: packing a suitcase. When you switch from a massive checked bag to a tiny carry-on suitcase, you don't literally shrink your clothes with a magic ray gun to make them fit. That would be blind scaling, and it's terrible. Instead, you fold your clothes differently. You roll them up, you rearrange them to maximize the new space. That is structural adaptation. We reflow the content. We absolutely do not just shrink text until you need a magnifying glass to read it. Let's deconstruct the lifecycle of a single card component to really see this in action. On desktop, we have the luxury of displaying 3 horizontal cards side by side, nice and roomy. At our tablet breakpoint, we structurally adapt. We might reduce the horizontal padding to save some space and switch the large top image to a smaller left-aligned thumbnail. Then, on mobile, we change the structure entirely again. We cleanly stack the image above the text, and we actually increase the vertical padding so the user can easily scroll without accidentally tapping the wrong thing. See? We didn't just shrink the desktop card, we completely folded and rearranged it for its new environment. This flows perfectly into number 4, designing for touchscreens. Here, we are leaving behind the surgical precision of a desktop mouse and entering the messy reality of human fingers. Or, as I like to playfully call them in UI design, sausage fingers. People are tapping on glass while holding coffee, they're distracted, and they are definitely not precise. So, 44. I want you to memorize this number, write it on a sticky note. 44 by 44 CSS pixels is the absolute minimum safe touch target size you should ever use. Anything smaller than 44 pixels, and your users are going to start fat-fingering the wrong buttons, triggering the wrong smart contract transactions, and getting incredibly frustrated. I mean, in Web3, a wrong tap can literally cost money. Give those sausage fingers some room.
And because we're dealing with touchscreens, we have a very strict rule in the lab: kill the hover state. On a desktop, sure, you can hover your mouse over a button to see a tooltip or reveal a hidden menu, but you can't exactly hover your finger in midair over a smartphone screen and expect the phone to know what you're doing, right? So all essential actions, menus, and information must be permanently visible, or they must be tucked safely behind an explicit, easy-to-tap toggle button. No exceptions.
Finally, we reach number 5, the prototype validation checklist. We've built our responsive layout, but before we ship this to mainnet, here are our strict acceptance criteria. First, verify zero horizontal overflow. If a user can scroll left or right on your mobile site, you have failed. Beware the dreaded horizontal scroll bar of doom. Next, test your mobile navigation usability. Can you actually reach the menu with one thumb? Confirm your component visual consistency. Are you still using those design tokens we talked about earlier? Ensure your content hierarchy is preserved, meaning the most important call to action should still be the most prominent thing on a small screen. And lastly, rigorously test your tap, click, and keyboard focus states. Now, if you do encounter that horizontal scroll bar of doom and you just can't figure out which element is breaking your layout, here's a little mad scientist engineering trick for you. Just jump into your CSS and add outline 1 pixel solid red to all your major containers. This instantly draws a red ink box around absolutely everything, and you'll immediately spot that one pesky fixed width image or container that's stubbornly refusing to shrink and causing structural overflow. Seriously, this will save you hours of debugging. So, you've passed the checklist. Your layout fluidly adapts from a giant monitor all the way down to a tiny phone. But I want to leave you with a provocative question to ponder before our next explainer. Your design is visually responsive, but is it functionally accessible to everyone? What about users who rely on screen readers or keyboard navigation? Well, that is exactly what we'll tackle next time. Also, if you're finding this engineering process fascinating, there are so many other incredible courses in the Solana curriculum to level up your entire development stack. To explore our full curriculum and learn more about this subject and other Web3 related topics, make sure to visit us at forge.college. Keep building, keep testing, and I'll see you in the next lab.